1, 2, 1, 2. All right. All right, people are coming on. All right. Good number of folks who are jumping back on. All right. See people connecting their audio. That is good. Hello, Taylor. Angelica, I see you're back. You're on. Let's see who else is going to link in. You know, and I'll be getting started shortly. Good to see you all. All right. Okay. If you can, please mute your microphone so that'll avoid any outside sound. And also, there's also a little chat window. If you don't feel like talking, there's always this wonderful group chat thing here. And I think there's also reactions. So there's like, if you want to put like a, you can click a thing to like raise one's hand, you can do that, or a thumbs up. There are all sorts of things that you can do. So, yep. All right, we'll get started shortly. But Angelica, good to see you, Taylor. Thank you for logging on. Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah. So there should be a little thing on the screen, like your bottom screen, that has like hand reactions, like thumbs up. Yep, there we go, Angelica. Or this little hand symbol, which is like raising a hand, as in like, hey, I have a question. So you can use that as well. So we're going to see who else is going to log on. You know, we try this brand new way of teaching and such. So my hope is, I'm still trying to figure this whole thing out with Zoom, that there's a way in which you can record classes. And so what I understand is there is a option to save Zoom recordings to the cloud. Let me see if this works this time as I record this class. If this doesn't work, once again, I'm trying to get some advisement on how to use, my mom screen records her classes from her laptop. Cool, that's awesome, Angelica. I'm trying to figure out, you know, that way as well. And I've been able to record the classes here on Zoom. The only issue is it's such a large file, they save it as an MP4, that it's hard for me to upload it onto Blackboard. If I use Blackboard, I think it's called Collaborate Ultra, then since all of us use Blackboard anyway, there'll be ways for you to access the recorded classes. The other thing I know is that Zoom also has, you can record your particular classes and put them onto the cloud. So my hope is that I'll be able, recording this way, to convert this recording to the cloud, so you all will be able to access it as a link versus me recording these classes to my actual portable hard drive, because that's a lot of data. Anyway, hopefully some other people will log in. Let me turn this down. Yeah, welcome back to English 1020 section, I think we're section 11. That's LD 11. And really, if you've kept up if you think about some of the announcements that I've put up on Blackboard so far, and I'm gonna share the screen. We'll just play a bit of catch up there, just so we're on point. So you'll have to excuse me because the issue of sharing the screen makes my volume a little bit off and my internet a little bit off. But we'll just go over a couple of things right now as far as updates. Yep, already it's saying your internet connection is unstable. So I don't know how much data this screen sharing does, but I'll try to limit it. So good to see you all. And so here's what we got so far. If you can see, can you all see the shared screen so far? Hope you can. You can click like a yes, a little thumbs up, or like the hand raise or whatnot if you can't see it. But I'm gonna scroll a little bit, scroll down, and these are some of the questions that I put up on the announcement from the other day. So again, if you have any questions after class, remember I am available for my usual office hours. So if you see at the bottom of the screen, even though it says 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., you can go ahead and say that's 1 p.m. So if you want to send an email and or contact me by text through my Google voice number, which is right here, 301-478-6134, you can do that. That'd be great. And I'd be able to stay in touch with you. And if you have any questions, that will work out. So as we scroll a little bit, here's just some of the things that you're scheduled for the week. You got a few chapters to read. Chapter 4, which is Understanding Fiction, which you hopefully have read, and it just kind of gives you some breakdown on where fiction comes from. A lot of stuff that we've already covered that's very familiar. So if it deals with the spoken word and the written word, pretty much fiction and poetry and even drama all come from the same place in a sense. Chapter 5 is actually a collection of where you'll find the short stories that you should be reading that are assigned on your calendar, even though the calendar is a little off as far as dates are concerned because of the spring break, the extended spring break. I'm going to do my best to make sure you all are able to stay up. So, in other words, as you can see, read chapter 4, Understanding Fiction, and chapter 5, and there's really just 3 stories that you should definitely read. And if I didn't list it, Love and Other Catastrophes is 1. Oh, there's the 3rd one. Second one, Girl, 95 to 96, and Slide to Unlock. And as you can see, most of these stories are not even, look, Love and Other Catastrophes is 1 page. Girl is literally like 2 pages, and Slide to Unlock.
Hear anything?
All right. If you could mute the microphone, pretty please, I appreciate it. Let's see who's on. All right. Hey, welcome, Ms. Russell. Thank you very much. So again, I'm just getting started with class and I'm talking a little bit about our schedules and stuff. So until I'm able to really update the class calendar that's on Excel, most of the updates I'll put on announcements for your classes. So if you're just jumping on, what I was sharing is a little bit of the assignment so far. So from in red, these are things that you need to read. Chapters, chapter 4 and 5, very short reads. And I'm gonna go over chapter 4 a little bit today. And by Thursday, chapter 6, which is graphic fiction, chapter 7, we'll be talking about plot, and then a couple of other short stories, like The Story of an Hour and How to Talk to Girls at Parties. And then there's also chapter 8, which is you just need to read some more short stories. Also on Thursday, I'm going to discuss the overview of short paper number 3, because we're kind of playing catch up because of that week that we lost for the extended spring break. But as you can see here, you got reading response number 8, which we do Friday, April 3rd by 11 p.m. And of course, short paper number 2, character analysis, is due Friday, April 3rd by 11 p.m. At this point, I'm not penalizing folks. You know, if you got your essay proposal forms in, hey, that's great. If you didn't, that's all right. You can still send them to me as soon as you did via email, and I'll just check them out. And I won't knock off 5 points off your score if you didn't have them in. We're all adjusting, so don't trip so much about the essay proposal form. Just make sure you get short paper number 2 in by Friday, April 3rd. I'm also going to spend time grading, you know, for those of y'all that turned in the second draft, if you were trying to raise your score for your short paper number 1, poetry explication, I'll be doing that as well. Also, if you left your textbook, you don't know where it is. As you can see here, I provided this link. So if you want to get the online version of the book, the textbook to get your reading on, you can. Here it is right here. And the course key is also here as well. So you should be good to go. So if you need to update on what we're doing this week, here's all the stuff we got so far. So stop sharing. Oh, I got an email from somebody. All right. Hello, got another person that jumped in. All right, Tia, thank you very much. Let me check my email really quickly because I think I've had some few people having some issues trying to log on. All right, here we go. All right. Okay. And this is from another student. The announcement section. Black. You're supposed to do. All right. So cool. It looks like we'll jump back in. So we're trying to navigate all this. And we're back. So thank you for those of y'all that are here. And so let's go ahead and get a little bit started with what's going on. So really just the key things you need to know about chapter 4. Once again, you know, understanding fiction. If you got the book, you got it. If you're looking at it online, this is great. You can check that out. A couple things you need to know. Let me once again answer this person's email so we can make sure. Boom, someone just said thank you. Cool. So we're back. All right. All you need to know, and I'm going to do this by sharing the screen one more time. Let's see, let's find chapter 5. We can work that. Here's some music in the background. So if you're just logging on, please put your speaker on mute. Work that out. But anyway, so welcome. If you're here, let's see who is here. All right, James. All right, greetings. All right, thanks for putting the mic on mute. And so, let's just go ahead and get started. So the key thing that you need to know, and the other thing I'm trying to work on is getting some PowerPoint stuff together. But as I said, I'm still figuring out all this stuff with Zoom. Hey, James, how you doing? So if you want the mic on, if you want the camera on, you're good. A lot of people keep the cameras off and stuff, but however you want it. So anyway, let's get started. All right, so just so y'all know, the real simple thing you need to know about fiction is just generally this. A narrative, right? Something you need to know. A narrative tells a story by presenting events in some logical or orderly way. And that's generally what, we do every day. Someone asks you what happened or what you just saw, and you present some particular things in a logical or orderly way. So that is a narrative. It's a story that's being told, and the events are being told in an order. Now, the difference between narrative and fiction is basically this. Fiction is a narrative, but the thing is, this narrative originates in the imagination of the author. So just keep that in mind. So the author is the one that's coming up with it. That's where fiction happens. I made it up. Now the key thing is, I'll say this about fiction: the story can be made up, but it's not really history or fact. So again, that's what we're dealing with fiction. It's a narrative that originates in the imagination of the writer. So of course, some fiction, historical or autobiographical fiction, for example, focuses on real people and is grounded in actual events. But the way the characters interact, what they say, and how the plot unfolds are largely by the author's invention. So just like, you may have movies, that give different people's perspectives. Like there are all sorts of movies that have like actual real life characters in there, even though the situations are fictional. And most of the times those people have to say, all right, this is historical fiction, meaning the time is real, but the actions and the story itself may be imaginative. Like, I think, what was that movie that came out years ago? It was like Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter or something. It takes place during the Civil War and stuff. But, clearly Lincoln wasn't fighting no vampires and things like that. So we keep that in mind. I think in the movie, Harriet Tubman shows up and she's fighting vampires. So that's all I'm saying when we talk about knowing the difference between narrative and fiction. So, those are the basics right now. So if you're with me, even if people aren't on the screen, if you want to, you go down to the bottom of the screen, there's a little smiley face that says reactions. You can put the thumbs up like I'm putting up on my screen, or you can put the little clap up there. We can say that's raising your hand to say like, hey, I got a question, and we'll work it that way. But yeah, that's where we are right now. So again, if any other people jump on, right now I am recording this class. Hopefully it's saved to the Zoom cloud, so I'll be able to offer it to you all as an actual link that you can look at later. Still trying to figure that mess out, so we'll see how it goes. All right, back to sharing the screen. There are a few things I want to show you. All right, so as chapter 4 goes on, and all I said, I'm just hitting on some of the small things you need to know. And here's some things that you already know. We talked about with poetry. Remember, all stories, for the most part, before people could read, it was oral tradition. So folks were generally talking to each other and passing on stories, you know, word for word, and things like that. And so in order for people to remember these stories, they used some of the things that were used in poetry or used in theater. And remember, if you think about drama, originally drama was called poetics. So I love the fact that I can say it all starts with poetry. So these poems were stories. So stories and songs emerged as oral means of communicating and preserving the past. And so as people pass these stories down, they use those various literary devices. So rhyme, you know, if you know the rhyme, memorize it long enough, you memorize the story. Alliteration, those are those consonants or sounds that you hear over and over again that people can follow. And then there's anaphora, the repetition of keywords or phrases to help make these stories easy to remember. And thus the earliest works of fiction were in fact poetry. You know, people making up their stories. So I'm so happy, you know, that that's happening. So we got that. Let's see another word, epics. We've already seen this in poetry. These are the long, drawn out adventure stories that focused on like a hero that was on a long journey or an adventure. So you could think of these long poems that were memorized, or some cases they were like songs. So you got the long things, if you had to read this in high school, like the Iliad or the Odyssey. So all these epics. So like Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which was like Chinese epics. So you have all these different things that are going on. So yeah, again, the same way that all story and theater and poetry kind of gets passed on, that's kind of where we are. They kind of talk about the different ages and the different stories. They talk about the Middle Ages and the Romance stories, which were stories that kind of took the place of the epics, where you had stories about gods and all these fantastical things. But the romances were like, you know, King Arthur, you know, war, chivalry, all these different types of things. As you can see, the Trojan horse from Homer's The Odyssey. You got all this stuff. You got, of course, these long epics that became stories, especially around the 14th century, because, and let me stop sharing the screen, 14th century is basically when stories start to move from, you know, people talking to people writing them down. So as more people become literate, more people are able to read, you know, the stories, you know, are now being passed on, not just verbally, but through books and stuff. So you get to a point where now the shift is rich and educated upper class people were the ones that had the novels and the books, right? So then this little invention shows up, which is called the printing press. And that made it easier for folks to print books out in a shorter amount of time and print more books and copies out so they could reach other people. So when that happens, the stories, you know, stop being less oral, which is fine because everyone has to learn, you know, through the reading of stories and telling of stories. But now books are getting passed around to different people, and boom, you get all these people collecting stories and wanting to hear more. And that's also where you get to the rise of the novel, because epics were long, but now people want to be able to have a book in their hands to be able to follow one particular character who's on an adventure. And so that's where we get to the novel. And that's where we get to like that soul story with multiple characters, multiple plots. Hey, Donnell, welcome. To multiple plots to where, you know, people want to stay on the page. So I'm about to share chapter 4 with you again, and the history of the novel. It's grown, it really has. So epics and romances generally had unified plots, developed characters, and complex themes. And so when people were able to push these into a solo volume, so there's the printing press. This is where the novel shows up. The first major novel that people talk about, some people say the English writer Daniel Defoe is commonly given credit for writing the first novel. Robinson Crusoe is an episodic narrative similar to a picturesque but unified by a single setting as well by a central character. Central character on an island, he's trapped. He's trying to make the best of his time on the island and such. And it's also these stories are also written as like journals. So that's the most interesting thing. So most of these guys are writing about their life. And in this type of time, the epistolary novel also flourished. The epistolary means letter. So the letter novels. So you got these novels that show up and they're fictional, but they're written like journal entries. So like day 1, day 2, or dear so-and-so. And so this is kind of how these novels stay in print. Some people like the regular standard novel of so-and-so walks in, he fights an animal and different things like that. But then you have the contemporary epistolary novel, which is written in letters. So if you've ever read Alice Walker's Color Purple, it's straight up a novel written in letters. The lead character, Celie, writes to her sister, who's been gone for a long time. She writes to God, but she's telling an amazing story. So it's almost like you're reading somebody's journal. The novel starts to grow by the time we get to the 19th century, and you've got in England, you've got series, like people start to blow up. So you got your man Charles Dickens. All right, hello, whoever's on, mute your microphone for a sec. All right, hey Janet. All right, you got a good number of folks on here. Good to see you all. All right, so if you're just joining in, I've been talking a little bit about just the rise of the novel in chapter 4. I talked a little bit about the difference between the narrative and the difference between narrative and fiction. And basically, fiction is a type of narrative that is created by the writer. So it's their imaginative story. A narrative can be a story of beginning, middle, and end. You have a narrative could be you talking about your day with somebody. But fiction is the narrative that is made up, but it's still in a particular order of events. But as of now, I'm still in the realm of chapter 4, and I'm talking a little bit about the rise of these novels. So if anyone's ever heard of A Christmas Carol, which was like a short story by Mr. Charles Dickens, but he also wrote all sorts of different types of novels, especially in England. Stories start to focus on what we call the novels of manners. Novels of manners are talking about how people treat each other. And beyond the world of aristocracy, members of the middle class clamored for novels that mirrored their own experiences, and writers such as George Eliot, Charles Dickens, and all of them wanted to show fictional worlds with people that, if you read them, you're like, oh, I reflect that society, or oh, that's my life. So if you can think about books that you've read that the characters kind of reminded them of you or experiences that you had, then you're kind of focusing on, you're learning about, how novels really work. So in the United States, you had people also moving from maybe so much fairy tales, but also focusing on certain issues like science and ambition and society and the dire consequences of science. So you got Frankenstein, like what happens when someone tries to bring someone back from the dead. You've got The Last of the Mohicans, which deals with, in a sense, colonialism. Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, if you've seen that bad boy, which deals with the issue of adultery and hypocrisy and all these different types of things. Some of these stories, which are called realism, which strove to portray everyday events and people. So you've got stories like The Great Gatsby, Sound and the Fury, all these different things where people are trying to find issues. Then by the time we get to the early 20th century, you got this movement called modernism, in which writers reacted to the increasing complexity of a changing world and mourned the passing of old ways under the pressure of much. So all these different things, stories of, how people moving from the country to the cities and all these different types of things. And so you cover a whole lot of stuff. And that's generally where we are as far as the story of the novel. Now, for those of y'all that, like, I can't really read a novel, that thing's way too long. So like, even when I offer up certain things that you can read, you're like, how many pages is that? 10 pages, 12 pages? I don't know. But it's funny, the short story was pretty much written for folks who, didn't have that much time, but they wanted a really good story with good characters. And so I'm going to give you a few of what would we call them, the characteristics or the elements of what makes a short story a short story. And it's a little more complex than you think. But a short story pretty much is as follows. As the chapter will tell you. So let me share this page. So can I get a show of, can I get some thumbs up out there if y'all are holding on? Y'all doing all right? Let's see. Okay, I see a visual thumbs up. Angelica, visual thumbs up. Donnell, thumbs up. Let's see. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. All right. Janet, hope you're hanging in there. Oh, yeah, thumbs up. Some people. All right, appreciate that. All right, visual thumbs up. All right, thank you. All right, I see. All right, so we'll go ahead and go to chapter 4. But we're still in chapter 4. So short stories are wild because, again, what makes them different from the larger novels is short stories. I guess you could say the ancestors of short stories, anecdotes, parables, fables, and folk tales and fairy tales. What all these forms have in common is brevity, or they're short and they have a moral. So there's always something at the end of the story that kind of has, a moral at the end, which is kind of like a little note or some sort of thing to explain to people the lesson that they need to learn by the end of the story. So Cinderella counts as a short story. It's also a fairy tale. Aesop's fables are contemporary versions of old, even ancient tales that can be traced back centuries. And so folk tales and fairy tales have many characteristics. You got like simple characters, and you don't have a lot of characters, but you have simple characters who illustrate a quality or a trait. So for example, Cinderella, stepdaughter, really nice. She has 3 evil stepsisters, a stepmama, and and then there's a prince somewhere in the story. But again, not a whole bunch of detail. It's just enough to learn about the characters. And so much of the appeal of Cinderella, for example, depends on the contrast between the selfish, sadistic stepsisters and the poor, gentle, victimized Cinderella. And that's how the story goes. They usually open with, you know the deal, once upon a time, and then they give you the example of who these characters are, and they jump right into action. All right, let's see who else has jumped in. Thank you for making it to class. All right. Hey, good to see you. If you could mute your microphone, we can work that out. So far, like I said, we're talking about how short stories are connected. And again, fairy tales, fables, anecdotes are those types of stories. Limited amounts of characters, and within a short story, you get pretty much a small amount of events. You find out who's in conflict with who, and usually by the end of the story, the resolution is the end of something that happens. So the conflict may end. Maybe the person who's in the story wins out against evil, or in some cases, sometimes maybe evil wins out, or one of those stories that's kind of like, well, you need to watch out, or this may happen to you. So you got that. I would even say The Grinch That Stole Christmas is kind of a story that deals with like a moral, which is like good people can change. So anyway, you have all these tales, these fairy tales and stuff, and most of the times if they weren't in novels, and because they were very short, people collected them into collections or anthologies where there were different themes. So you got the Canterbury Tales, which by Geoffrey Chaucer, which were small short stories that people could read, but in that case, some people couldn't, wanted to collect them all, I don't know, kind of like Pokemon or something. Or Grimm's Fairy Tales, which is an early collection of short narratives and folk stories that helped pave the way for the development of the genre of fairy tale. But it was not until the 19th century that the contemporary version of these emerged. So with the printing press, you basically got people who were starting to collect literature. So by the last time of the 19th century, magazines start to show up, journals start to show up. So people are trying to get little pieces of short fiction because they don't have a lot of time to read novels, or they can't afford novels. So in that case, they would get these series or serials in which you could read these short stories in collections. So Nathaniel Hawthorne's got these short stories. Edgar Allan Poe's got Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque. So you could find a whole collection of their little stories in there. So that's the way in which people couldn't read a novel, but they could read little portions. So in fact, because the short story was embraced so readily and developed so quickly in the United States, it is commonly thought of as an American literary form, or as I call it, short teaching. So real quick, defining a short story, really simple. The novel is an extended piece of narrative fiction. It's extended, it's much longer. The short story is distinguished by its relative brevity, which creates a specific set of expectations and possibilities as well as certain limitations. So unlike the novelist, the short story writer can't give a whole lot of space to give you a long plot or a large number of characters. So short stories, you can't really read this right now, but short stories often begin close to or the height of action and develops a limited number of characters. So that said, if you think about it, and let me go ahead and pull up the whiteboard, you probably will recognize this little thing I'm gonna draw right now. So this is your friend. Remember Freytag's pyramid? And you got like your exposition here. You got your rising action here. You got your climax here. You got your, your falling action here. Can't believe I'm writing so good. Then you got your conclusion. Ooh, if you knew what I was writing with, it's terrible. But anyway, the way the short story goes, there might be a point to where they don't have that much time to give you a whole lot of exposition, right? So in that case, they may be like, all right, boom, let's cut that out. So let's say we were talking about Hansel and Gretel. So literally, it'd be, like literally the exposition would say, names of the characters, Hansel, Gretel, father, and the mother. They give you the setting, and then they jump into the rising action. So really, if you think about it, ooh, this is terrible. Once upon a time is kind of like that keyword to let you know kind of how short the story is going to be. Novels generally don't open up with some once upon a time. They just start with all the general explanations and stuff. So we got that going on. So once upon a time is the short story way of saying, let's jump right into the action. Once upon a time, there were 3 bears. Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs. Once upon a time, see what I'm saying? That's how it kind of works with the short stories and with fairy tales. Whereas the novel, you're going to get a whole explanation. They might write about the setting before they even get to characters. You probably got 10 or 11 characters versus fairy tales. Well, think about it. The Billy Goat's Gruff, 3 goats. The 3 little pigs. Goldilocks and the 3 bears. Cinderella. Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. They're literally breaking it down. They don't have a whole lot of time, but they just want to share these stories. So that's generally how short stories work. But that's not all. So let me go ahead and bring the screen up one more time. Because what you'll need to see is there's even different types of short stories. So you got your modern short story, but then you also have a thing called a short story. It uses limited space to establish a distinct setting and develops 2 characters. So you've got stuff like that. That's what a short story would be. Very, very few characters. But to go a little bit further, as noted, remember the short story is a work of fiction that is marked by the fact that it's short and has a relatively limited number of characters and it has a short time frame. And what makes it powerful is if it's able to tell you the theme or significance of stuff that's going on without losing your attention span, that's a successful short story. Like you get to the end of it and you don't feel like you've been reading for forever, or you get to the end of it and you're like, dang, I wanted more. That's a really good short story. So some other friends in the realms of fiction, this isn't so much a short story, but a novella is longer than a short story. It's an extended short story that may have some characteristics like a novel. So it may be kind of short, but it still has greater character development. So a novella may have 4 to 5 characters versus with a short story, you'd probably have 2 to 3. At the other end of the spectrum are short stories, which are under 1,500 words. So that's about 5 pages. And there are a couple of short stories in your textbook that you'll need to read. There's also a thing called prose poems, which we kind of mentioned, which are hybrid versions of literature that have characteristics of both prose and poetry. So that's that weird little area that poets get into fistfights over, because sometimes people say, oh, I'm a prose poet, and some other poets will be like, nah, bro, what you are is you just figured out a way to get a poem in there, but you decided to design it as if it were a short story. Other things, you can't really read the text, but there are also graphic stories and graphic fiction. Anybody out there, a comic book person or a graphic novel person. Have you ever read it? You know, you can throw a thumbs up if you have. But yeah, graphic fiction and graphic novels are just similarly the same thing. You're using illustrations to tell the story. Some folks, they like that even better when you get an actual photo. I'm a big fan of graphic novels. Matter of fact, if I reach down here, I actually have one that I'm reading, and you know, I enjoy fiction, I enjoy all sorts of stuff. So, like this particular graphic novel I'm reading, um, it's and I'm not good with the Greek numbers or letters and stuff, but literally this is like a weird story about like a night, like almost like a different future in America. And this black woman, she's a cab driver, but she has this enchanted tire iron that she uses to fight demons and monsters and stuff. So if we talk about graphic novels, as you can see on the back, you got monsters like coming up here, attacking the city, and she's still driving people, you know, making her fares and stuff. And if she has to, she brings out her looks like Thor's hammer, and she comes out there and you know and knocks monsters upside the head with her master tire iron. That's what I mean by an example of graphic novel. So next thing I'm just going to really bring up because we're about to wrap up in a few. I don't want to run y'all too deep into the ground, but if we go further, short stories can be all sorts of things. They can be comic, they can be tragic. The different subject matters are now all over the place: marriage, crime, punishment, war, sexual awakening, death, or any number of human concerns. The settings of graphic of short fiction and stories can be imaginary worlds, the old west. Like really, there's no holds barred. So if you go to the bottom, as the selections in this anthology show, and the anthology meaning your textbook, the possibilities of the short story are almost endless. Speaking of possibilities, that's why we go to chapter 5. Chapter 5 is literally the fiction sampler for your short stories. Things that you definitely gonna need to read. See, I got an email from someone. Give me 1 second. Let's see what this person says. All right, so someone hit me up to say, okay, I'll talk to them later. But let's get back to where we were. All right, so, okay, I've lost you. Oh no. There we go. All right, let me bring it back. Still navigating this stuff. So let's go back to sharing the screen. Oh, okay. Some other folks have jumped in. Appreciate it. Good to see you. All right. So chapter 5 is what you need to be reading as far as your assigned stories. And so this chapter, as you can see, it is the short story sampler. And short stories, again, if you really want to know how they work, this section gives you the number of page lengths. So a short story is a short story that is fewer than 1,500 words in length. And even these short stories have different categories. So for example, depending on the number of words that are being used, you have a particular name for it. So microfiction is probably the shortest. At approximately 250 words or fewer is one of the shortest kinds of short fiction. So short fiction is always going to be 1,500 words or less. Microfiction, 250 words. Then you got flash fiction, which is stories that come and go in a flash, and that's 1,000 words. And then you got sudden fiction, which is fewer than approximately 1,500 words. I think they're splitting hairs here. I just generally would just say short fiction, under 1,500 words, but they still put a lot of story into a small package. So what you're going to be reading are a couple of things. And we talk about small packages, that also means non-traditional writing. So this first short story that you're going to read is called Love and Other Catastrophes, a mixtape. So by the time we reconnect on Thursday for class, you should definitely check this out. I love it. It's non-traditional. It's still a short story. And basically, it's a story told in song titles. There's a song title, and then the actual artist. So this person literally is telling the story through the song titles. Amanda Brown is the actual writer. You know, and another thing about Amanda Brown, she loves music so much is because she co-owns an independent record label, No Not Fun. So she kind of has a connection with music. Then you got Jamaica Kincaid, Caribbean writer, grew up in Antigua, and her short story is written almost like a monologue. So again, you can write in non-traditional ways. So it's this character that's talking, and you can check that out. So it's really not that much. And this is what we talk about with short short fiction. Look at that, almost a page and a half. So you might be reading for a good 10 or maybe even less, 5 to 6 minutes. Especially if the story is good, you might zip through it and be done. This next piece, which you have to read, is by Ed Park, and it's called Slide to Unlock. And it's got a really good twist. So this is also what you'll definitely be reading and checking out these stories. I'm not going to give it away. Oh, there's my finger once again, hanging out. But anyway, here are the things that you're definitely going to need to read. And then next up, chapter 6 is the graphic fiction sampler. And that's dealing with what I just talked about, the graphic novels. So they talk about web comics. If you're a fan of manga, they have those. They talk about superhero comics, and even how comics have generally been around as kind of a side genre to fiction. So if you think about it, comics have been around for a while. Comic strips show up first. Think about if you ever read Garfield or Snoopy or Charlie Brown or different things like that. Those are comics. And just like we talked about short fiction, remember those comics are usually 3 to 4 panels, and they tell a little bit of a story, and then you come back the next day to find out the rest of it. So again, same type of practice. That's generally just how it works. So definitely check out the comics that are offered in the comic section. And I don't know, some cases, there are people that like comics way more than they do other novels. And as we can see, people take stories from comics and make them into films. And so here are just some samples that they show, like Harlem Hellfighters, which talks about the plight of the Black soldiers during World War I and what they had to do when they had to fight for democracy. And even though they fought in that foreign war, they came back to the United States, still had to deal with that, with racism. And if you think about it, remember we just finished watching a soldier's play and reading a soldier's story. And remember Sergeant Waters, he was in World War I. And remember he tells that story about what happened while he was there. They thought things were going to get better. And then for Black soldiers, and they didn't. So yeah, that's where we are. So hopefully, as you can see, all these things that we're covering right now will definitely keep you ready for your next few papers. So when we actually talk on Thursday, we'll talk a little bit about the overview with short paper number 3. Although I know y'all are like, Professor Brown, we haven't even turned in short paper number 2 yet. Don't worry, I'm going to give you some time with that. But it's always good to be up on the other assignments and things. So to close out class, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you, and I've figured this out finally, how to show you footage from other things in order to keep you focused on it. So I'm going to show you a clip from this documentary, and it's actually going back to an author I mentioned earlier today, which is Alice Walker. Any show of hands, anyone who's heard of Alice Walker? Okay, thanks, James. And you can hit that little insignia at the bottom of the screen that says you know who Alice Walker is. I'm gonna put thumbs up. She wrote The Color Purple, so if you've seen the film with Whoopi Goldberg, or if maybe you went and saw the musical with I forget the girl who's from my hometown, Fantasia also was in this. Okay, thank you, Z. So yeah, but yeah, this is one of those stories that comes from the imagination of a writer. And in this case, Alice Walker, this is her explaining where her characters come from, and also how people kind of felt about this story that she wrote, and how even though it was a fictional story, people had problems with the subject matter that she was writing about. So even when you talk about themes, even though this stuff may have happened and it's her characters, it wasn't a real person, but there was still a point where a lot of people were like, oh, I don't appreciate that. And they were focused more on her themes and didn't really follow the story. So give me a sec. I'm about to pull up this documentary, and we'll see if it works. So I'm gonna pull up some info. Let's see, and we'll make this work. Thank you all for hanging out with me today for our first day of class so far. All right, let me pause it. We'll close that down. All right. So let's work that out. So I'm gonna put share computer and sound, sharing for a video clip. And let's see if I can find this video clip. All right. Let's see if y'all can see it. I don't know if y'all can see it yet. We'll work that out. It was doing so well before. All right, so let's find this screen. Okay. Let's see if you can see it. If I can get it working right, we'll be good to go. All right. Share the screen. Nope, that's not what I want. Hope y'all can see it. All right, still working on it. Give me a sec. All right.
Was provided by the Ford Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Luester Team.
Okay, let's see. I don't know if y'all can see it. Give me a sec. Can you all see the film screen yet? Yes or no? No, yes, no. All right. I had it going. It was perfect the last time. We'll figure this out. So let me go again to the screen share and make this happen. All right. Thank y'all for your patience. Hope y'all are staying safe out there. I'm trying to do the same, especially, you know, under the circumstances where they want everybody inside. So got that going on. There we go. All right, here we go.
Charitable Trust, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by viewers like you.
All right.
The Lila Wallace Reader's Digest Fund, and by the following.
So let's see. I hope y'all can see it. Fast forward to
Art created over the inside.
Write about what I know. And Black women playwrights, poets, novelists, and essayists began to make themselves heard. This is a poem that I wrote during the 60s when the Black Revolution was just
So this is Alice Walker.
always upon us and with us. And sometimes in not a very pleasant way, because we were often, I mean, those of us who were writing poems were often told what kinds of poems we could write, you know. And so I decided that to hell with all the stuff that you want me to write. I'm going to write about what I know, and I'm going to write about the people I care about. And so this is called In These Dissenting Times, and it's sort of a manifesto or a womanifesto. In these dissenting times, I shall write of the old men I knew and the young men I loved, and of the gold-toothed women, mighty of arm, who dragged us all to church. In 1977, 33-year-old Alice Walker was living in New York City, working as an editor at Ms. Magazine. Walker had published 2 novels about the exploitation and suffering of Black women. Now she was contemplating a new book whose shape was sparked by a story her sister told her. The story was that the wife of this man had asked the lover of this man for a pair of her panties, or as they used to call them, drawers. And this was so intriguing to me because it struck in me an interest in the kind of eroticism that people have, you know. And in this instance, it felt to me that there was a bond between the women, and then they each had a bond with the man. So it was a very bisexual story to me. I mean, it struck a very bisexual thing in my mind. So I thought about that, and that feeling, a lot of it went into creating this triangle, basically, that is between Celie and Mr. and Shug. Walker began drawing on her family history to create Celie, a Southern woman in the early 1900s. Mr. was the man Seeley was forced to marry. Shug was Mr.'s lover, and eventually Seeley's.
Well, of course, she doesn't tell you when she's going to start writing a book. You know, she just does it. But she describes it as being pregnant and looking for a place to give birth.
My characters really detested New York. Their favorite expression, as I would struggle out of my bed in Brooklyn and go to Manhattan through the maze of skyscrapers, their favorite expression was, "What is this tall anyway?" I had to change my life completely. I was married, I got a divorce. I lived in New York. I had to move here to a tiny town in Mendocino called Boonville. And that's when I really settled in to write it.
Having carried the story in her head for several years, Walker wrote The Color Purple in just months. The novel tells the story of Seeley's struggle toward independence after enduring a childhood and marriage in which she was beaten and raped.
Dear God, Harpo asked his daddy why he beat me. Mr. say, 'cause she my wife, plus she's stubborn. All women good for. He don't finish. He just took his chin over the paper like he do. Remind me of Pa. Harpo asked me, well, how come you stubborn? He don't ask, how come you his wife? Nobody asked that. I say, just born that way, I reckon. He beat me like he beat the children, except he don't never hardly beat them. He says, Seeley, get the belt. The children be outside the room peeking through the cracks. It's all I can do not to cry. I make myself wood. I say to myself, Seeley, you a tree. That's how come I know trees fear man.
I was on vacation and I called her long distance to say, this is it. And she said, you think so? And I said, this one is it. And what I meant was, until that point, Alice was sort of known, sort of well known. So, but I said, this one is going to throw you out there.
Walker's novel was published in June 1982.
My first reaction as I opened the book was, these are letters, and this is an epistolatory novel, and how is she going to pull this off? I mean, I can see she's facing some very difficult problems, violence, and relationships between men and women, and violence between men and women.
She raised...
So let me pause real quick. So as you can see, some of the things you're kind of learning how Alice Walker, how her ideas come to be. And that's the big thing about narrative. And that's the most amazing thing about fiction is where do these ideas come from? Some of the stuff is from real life. You know, for her, she said the story of the two women and the whole exchanging of the underclothes and stuff leads to this big story. So that's the amazing thing about where stories come from. Real life stuff tied in with, you know, you take a real life moment, but then you imagine it to become something else. So that's what we're generally talking about when we talk about fiction. Now, I'm going to show this last little part here to show kind of the reaction of what happened once the film came out and the book came out. So you had some people, as you see here, who loved it. And then other people were like, even though this is fictional, you're kind of touching on some little tender parts that are making certain sides of society kind of go, I don't know if I like what you're writing. So let me go right back to sharing the screen again. Let's see if we can get this playing. All right.
To these issues, and then I thought...
All right, so once again, let me figure this out again. Technology. All right, it'll make me figure this out one more time. Let's see, share the screen. How was I able to figure it out before? Share computer sound. All right.
back to growing up in.
Let's see. He tries again. Thank y'all again for being very patient as I figure out how to find these dang on files and stuff. I had it going last time. It's a very sometimey thing. All right, we'll try this one more time. Oh my goodness. Okay. Nope. All right, try that again. All right. All right. All right. Let's see if this works. Nope, I did wrong. Lord. It was working before. Let's see. Okay.
Betraying the Black community by presenting
Story of
Major funding for I'll Make Me a World was provided by the Ford Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Lester T. Mertz Charitable Trust, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by...
All right, I give up. Anyway, so once I get the hang of this whole screen thing, so literally the rest of the video talks about when the book comes out and it becomes a movie, how there were folks that really were, especially a lot of men who were irritated by what they felt was an unfair display of how Black men were shown in the film and in the book. And so out of that, there was a lot of backlash that took place because of it. Yeah. But I guess on this day, I'm just not able to show the video clip. But at any rate, kind of have what you need to read so far as chapter 4 and chapter 5. Definitely follow up, by Thursday by reading the 3 short stories, and be on the lookout today for the reading response number 8 that I'm going to put up, and that's going to be due on Friday. Hopefully with this recording, I'm able to turn it into the Zoom cloud link so you all will be able to read it and check it out for those of you all that missed the class. And if I'm unable to do that, I'll give you a note about it. And perhaps by Thursday, we'll try something new, which is maybe using Blackboard Collaborate, which might make things a little bit easier. But I appreciate everybody who came to class today. Have a great time. May you be able to, step outside or do whatever you need to do. But I'm going to keep, holding it down with teaching classes. And I'll see you on Thursday. Again, you have all my contact information if you want to stay in touch with me. If you have questions about papers and such, I'm still trying to work out my schedule along with teaching online with high school stuff, because I still am teaching in DCPS high schools doing the same thing with Zoom. So I'm really going to try to make this work out, and also know that I'm not going to penalize you for, stuff that may be late by like an hour or even by a day. So yeah, again, thanks everybody for logging in, and I'm signing off. And again, my office hours, 11 until 1 p.m. today. You can either reach me by my Google Voice number or text or by the usual email. So thank y'all very much. See you all later. Be safe out there. And until Thursday, take care.